recently I watched an episode of a podcast that really had me going. I, like many other people online, love to listen to and enjoy Reddit stories because whether they're true or not, they lend to some entertaining outcomes, and sometimes they're way too good to be true and sometimes they're way too good to be true. You know what I'm saying? All that said, in a specific episode, they talked about passport bros. And it just tickled my fancy a little bit because I do know some people who did become passport bros, not necessarily for the misogynistic reasons, but for just preference. Hopefully that makes sense. In fact, my own dad actually became a passport bro because his wife, Larami, is from the Philippines. They met through a mutual friend. It was cool, it was copacetic, they got along well, they got married, and it's been happily ever after. Unlike, say, the more stereotypical passport bros who go to these other countries because they fetishize about them, they have this idea that they'll be the perfect 50s housewife, whatever. That's not what happened with my dad. But there are people who fall into either category and both are considered passport bros. So what does this have to do with cars? Let's talk about that. What's up everybody, my name is Nick Lanz and welcome to Car Rant. Here we do builds, reviews, and have candid conversations about car stuff like we're doing today. So if any of that sounds good, fun, and interesting to you, stick around because there's plenty more coming. Without further ado, let's jump in. Last season, I had made the statement that Japanese car enthusiasts are the passport bros of the auto industry. Passport bros are guys here in America, the West, going to other nations to find women, namely Asia, Latin America, stuff like that. And of course, me being a car guy, it got me going, is there an equivalent? And then it hit me. The JDM car community is basically the passport bros of the car community. All their favorite cars come from Asia. They try to spend tons and tons of money to import them here and make them legal so they can enjoy them every day. There's this god-tier expectation that they'll outperform anything here in the domestic West. And there's this incredibly unhealthy thought process that it takes very little to keep them running right. Tell me I'm wrong. Let's just say season 11, Nick had a lot to say. Starting from the top, we have to acknowledge that what I said is true. I myself have owned over a dozen Japanese cars, and 2 of them being properly JDM. In case you guys forgot, I owned the Killionaire Loyal for a little while, and I also own my Pajero, which is actually my daily driver. Trust me when I say that I get it. I understand some of the hype around the Japanese cars, because for a lot of them, they just weren't available to us at all. But the biggest problem is hype culture. And how hype culture has created this passport bro mentality when it comes to Japanese domestic vehicles. Because the truth of the matter is that some of those cars really aren't that great. They're just great because we couldn't have them. And as technology moved forward, they are now obsolete. Or in many instances, being outperformed by even the simplest of cars today. If you're new to cars and you're just what the heck is going on, a lot of Japanese domestic vehicles or JDM cars were never sold in the United States. They were specifically just for Japan and largely Oceania. Other countries did get a couple of examples of those cars, but not all of them. A lot of them were specifically just for Japan. One of the key big ones for me that's not a Nissan was the Evo. As you can tell, I owned one for a long time. It was my favorite car I've ever had, and we didn't get them until 2003 when they had already been on the market for almost 10 years in other countries. Evos are notoriously capable of making a lot of power. They can be extremely reliable if you're willing to deal with their maintenance, and they are tough cars and very fast, agile. You can use them for a lot of different forms of motorsport, and we didn't get them until the technology was older. In my previous video last season when I was talking about the state of automotive YouTube, I talked a lot about the car and how I had the right expectations for it going into the project. I understood that it doesn't have a lot of power out the door. I understood that it's going to take a lot of money to get that power out of it. And I also understood that the parts availability makes some of those parts a little more expensive. Bear in mind, I had gotten my car when it was considered to be slightly older at 15 years old. Now, my car is 21 years old. Coming back around to the hype culture stuff, there was a lot of fanfare and a lot of presentation for these cars. I can distinctly remember being the year 2016, 17, and 18 and just the GTR R32 craze. It had gone haywire very quickly. The prices of those cars were skyrocketing. Some people were even surmising that we might hit $500,000 for some examples, which I think is ridiculous. And they continue to push these things as if they were these god-tier cars. But the problem is that technology at that point in time was over 25 years old. See, here in the States, we're not allowed to import those cars that we really wanted until they're 25 years old. And in some municipalities now, they're changing the laws where you won't be able to register some of those cars because they don't meet certain safety and or environmental requirements. One of the big things that happened recently was actually Maine banning the ability to register things like Pajeros and more specifically the Delica wagons. People were using them as off-road vehicles, which they are, but the Delica vans and wagons were not considered normal road legal cars because of the fact they didn't pass safety stuff. Someone from Maine can give you a lot more nuance down in the comments section, but that's the basic gist of the situation. Hand on the Bible, if I could get my hands on a Delica, I would absolutely drive the mess out of that as a daily over the Pajero. Not because I'm worried about the Pajero per se, but because, dude, it's a freaking cab over van. That's so cool. So these kids are seeing these cars coming over from Japan. The older crowd is hyping these things up because like, oh, they're so cool. The R32 won all these races as the Calsonic car in Japan and Australia and everything else. And they're telling them the stories of old, which is cool. It's passing on a tradition, but it's also making them larger than life. This in turn created an unhealthy expectation out of these cars. And by process, it's getting more and more grandiose in their heads. And then when they're older and they can finally buy these cars, they're sorely disappointed. And they do things to the cars that devalue them in horrible ways, or they sell them for cheap because they're so upset that, I didn't make 1,000 horsepower out the door, or I got beat by the newest Toyota or Honda Civic or whatever it might be car. A Econobox thing is outpacing this race car. Like, people, I've heard it time and time again, where they buy this car, they get so upset, and then they junk the car, or in some cases will crush the car at Whistling Diesel instead of respecting what it is. So, like the passport bros, they think they're gonna find this god tier thing in Japan. They spend all this money to bring it over and they try and win its affections, if you will, or in this case, make it to their expectations, only to find out it's gonna cost them way more to do that in the end. And on top of even all of that, they don't take care of them the way they should. I've heard several examples where people get these cars and they don't do the proper maintenance like they should on them, and they're blowing motors, dropping gears and transmissions, they're taking out the differentials because they're not doing the due diligence to maintain these things or even repair them as they should be, because some of these cars aren't perfect coming from Japan. It hurts my soul, but it's true. And on top of this, some of the domestic cars make way more power and you can spend half just to buy it outright. I mean, you could literally spend the same amount of money on a base model Ford GT as some of these Supras and GTRs and God knows what else coming out of Japan, make way more power, still have a warranty, and put regular gas in it instead of having to use high octane. Oh, and on top of all that, you have one of the best V8s on the market right now in that Mustang, so it's probably going to outlive whatever RB series motor or 2J happens to be in the car that you're importing, since most of the imported cars are some variety of Toyota or Nissan these days. I say all that to say I'm not hating on my JDM fanboys, because I myself am a JDM fanboy. But at the same time, there needs to be a healthy recognition that this car has this God tier status in my mind because I put it there, not because it actually is there. That this is going to take a lot more effort and work to maintain and keep running than something else, because parts availability or maybe the fluids I need for the motor, trans, and etc. might no longer be made or hard to come by. In the case of Evos, Diaqueen has been made now for several years because EPA banned its manufacture, thus making those really good OEM fluids extremely hard to come by or very expensive. JDM fanboys, I feel your pain and I hear you. But we need to teach our next generation of young people that are getting into these cars that while they are really cool, really awesome, and can be made to do incredible things, they still need to get to that point, and it's going to take some diligence and effort to do so. It's not just going to magically be there automatically. And more importantly, we need to show them that they need to be spending their money on what they're able to actually keep, own, maintain, etc., let alone anything to do with actually getting the car. And before I forget, one of the other big struggles of owning an imported vehicle that I myself live with is insurance. A lot of insurance companies don't treat these Japanese cars the same way we do. And in fact, my insurance company thinks my Pajero is only worth $1,000, when in reality it's worth over 20 grand, because that's what people pay for the Exceeds. But all that said, what do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you think that the JDM scene has become the passport bro of the car community? Or do you think the JDM guys are justified? Let me know down in that comment section. And stay tuned, because John has a lot to say about the Euro car scene coming up in the next episode. So without further ado, God bless you guys, and stay tuned for John's take on the Euro scene.